Welcome to From the Source, a podcast where we connect directly with the marketers, buyers, and operators who are building and scaling modern B2B growth engines. In an industry filled with noise, buzzwords, and endless tactics, the show focuses on what actually works. Each conversation dives into how experienced marketing leaders think about demand generation, vendor partnerships, team alignment, emerging technologies like AI, and the real challenges of building effective marketing organizations. All right, today we have Karina Shabelsky with us. She's the Director of Digital Marketing at Suki AI. Hi, Karina, how are you?
Hey, Dave. I'm good. How are you?
Oh, better than I deserve, like always. I'm super excited for today's conversation. Karina and I have known each other for quite some time through a lot of different projects, a lot of learnings, and I'm super excited to hear her perspectives and the value she could drive around AI, ABM, and some search items as well. Thanks so much for taking the time, Karina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super, super, super stoked to share some insight, of my experience. Yeah.
No, I think it'll be a lot of fun. So first, let's dive into the AI stuff. Have you heard of AI?
I have just a
It's
little
all the
bit.
buzz, right?
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of press around it, obviously. A lot of people think it's the next big earth-changing idea. I agree. I do think it is the next internet, so to speak. But I think, like we were just talking about, we have to remember kind of what the internet was back in the early days. It's not necessarily the same experience we see today. So I would say from a technology standpoint, there is more tech available to marketers than ever before. But in a lot of cases, we're actually seeing worse outcomes, not better. So I'm curious, in your perspective, is that true? And if so, what do you think is causing that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true. And I think the issue here is prompting. People are not experienced in prompting, or they're just taking the first answer they're getting. With AI, who knows where AI is pulling things from? It's never going to get things right on the first try. So you still need to have that critical thinking. You need to be the driver. You need to get the AI to where you want to go and not just accept that, first draft is the truth. We see that, or I see it quite a bit. I've always told people, start with your problem and how you want to solve it, and then train it to where you want to go, and train it to where you're happy with that answer and it makes sense to you, and train it to where you are confident enough to take that idea and present it to leadership if you're using it for work, or to your partner, or to whoever. But you need to be comfortable with what you're presenting.
Absolutely. I think training is the big thing. Prompting obviously is the way to train that, but I do see a lot of people thinking that maybe it's an out of the box technology that's just ready to go from the get go. And I think training is something that we could probably spend hours talking about. But yeah, the various agents that I use, I train in very specific use cases. I even ask it what it needs to know to become an expert in certain areas, and I let it help me train it, if that makes any sense. And I think that that's been probably one of my biggest learnings around AI and how to be effective with it. And I don't claim to be nearly as effective as I need to be able to use it as some people would like to use it today.
Yep. And it's okay to start over. Sometimes you're just not
Yeah,
getting where you want to be. So start over. Just clear chat, start again.
great advice. And I think sometimes I should probably do that too. I think so. Kind of in that vein, though. I mean, where do you see teams relying too much on AI instead of critical thinking?
So copy. Personally, for me, even copy is not my strong point. I'm a more technical brain. So when you're using AI, you're feeding it your product specifications, but you cannot really feed it emotion. AI does not have emotion. As a marketer, you need to understand pain points. You need to understand how people are feeling, and AI just doesn't. It's not there yet. Maybe it will be there one day, but yeah, you
Kind of
still
hope
need your
not.
human emotion.
No, I think that that's a very key concept, and then also training it, right? Feed it material on how you speak. It can learn to speak like you, but it's never going to be you. I think that's an
I hope not.
important concept. So I think this is an important concept that you and I talked about some time ago, and you may not remember, but someone uses AI versus someone that leverages AI.
Mhm.
Can you kind of talk about how you view those as different items and maybe pros and cons?
Yeah. So to leverage I what I do is I build almost like environments. I feed it. So, for example, Claude work cowork right now is really popular, and it's people are switching from ChatGPT to Claude. But I like to build an environment, a project, and I feed in all sorts of documentation, videos to become kind of. I want it to become an expert in that field. And then I just constantly ask it questions and reiterate and then give it points. As I'm working, on a weekly basis, I'll say like, oh, new piece of information here, add it into this project. And then, you can utilize as a marketer all these different assets. But kind of people who just use AI, they're using it as they would Google, just asking a question. And does it work? Sure, maybe. Does it get the answer? But sometimes it might even be quicker to Google. I have seen Google snippets, the AI overviews, pull in some crazy things and data that are still quite sloppy. AI slop is still a thing. So, sometimes it actually does make sense. If you're just going to be like a user, use Google. You might get a better answer or something more accurate.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of times we as professionals lose sight that a tool is only as good as the data it's pulling from.
Yeah. And
And
what
that's
happens
really a
when
big
AI is pulling from all AI data?
right. I think there's a movie way back when called Multiplicity. When you make a copy of a copy of a copy, it's not quite as sharp as the original. I
Yeah.
think, that's producing a lot of slop
Yep.
as you're putting it. So no,
Yep.
I couldn't agree more. So, and this might be too broad of a question for the time we have allotted today, but prompt engineering, what does good look like? Is there some advice you could give the listeners and
Yeah.
give them some
So
value?
from a marketing perspective, ask it to you ask the AI, put yourself into a digital marketer's shoes, a content marketer's, a copywriter's shoes, and then explain things or build things as somebody in this person's shoes. Give it a clear goal, give it an outcome, ask it for any sort of supporting data, anything like that.
Yeah, creating the right
Yeah.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
something to
I,
consider if you're paying for these tools and you're being cost conscious, the more you can get into one prompt, the better. Because the more you're having back and forth conversations. If you're on a credit model, you're paying for every time you're asking a question. So get all your things into one prompt, even, and save costs.
no, some very good advice. So a little bit of a pivot, but you know me, I'm a tangential
Mhm.
thinker. I wanted to get into vibe coding, right? I know
Yeah.
you and I have talked about that quite a bit. So it's exploding. What do you see? How is it empowering marketers or creating maybe even new risks?
Yeah. Vibe coding is amazing, but it does not replace the need for an engineering team, a development team. There is a huge problem right now where a lot of these vibe coded projects are being deployed by marketers or, whoever. And there's huge security risks. For example, AI does not replace security. I come from a cybersecurity background. I'm no longer in cybersecurity. I'm now in healthcare tech, but still it's a thing top of mind. I would never, and I vibe code things, I'd say, on a daily basis. I have crazy ideas and I'll just put them into a tool like Lovable and create a website, but I would not deploy them until either I have an engineer look at it, somebody who's part of the SRE team to look at it. But it's quite dangerous, and I think we're going to start seeing a lot of like malware and things that are not great. Even hackers can vibe code things as well.
Right. And
So
probably more efficiently than the public.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's almost like a WebMD model, right? We started having all of these health scares when WebMD became a thing because people
Yep.
were going out and diagnosing themselves and without going to the professionals. Yeah.
Which it's
No,
okay to diagnose yourself, but don't go to the doctor and tell them I
get
already
validation.
diagnosed myself.
Trust but verify. No,
Yep.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
So okay, I know tech is your passion, it's your language, but at Suki, your primary focus is digital marketing, right? And ABM beyond that. Are you using AI in any of your strategies, planning, methodologies, implementations? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I use AI quite a bit. Suki is quite complex. We have two very different sides of the business. There's one clinician-focused side, and there's a partner side. And the material for both are very different. Here, you're targeting doctors, end users, and then on the other side, you're targeting health tech companies who can build or can use your or our solution, Suki's solution, to build their own kind of solution using SDKs and APIs. Every meeting I have is product centered, I feed into like a notebook LM, and I'll ask it questions. So any sort of, tell me how does this product work, and all of that is almost based on internal conversation. It's not looking at the web or anything on the website. It's just based solely on internal conversation. Also, for all my one-on-ones, my direct reports, I like to use or record. We use Gemini and feed all those one-on-ones into Notebook LM. And then I can, at the end of the quarter or the end of the month, I can say, hey, what did we accomplish this quarter? What did we accomplish this month? What are some struggles we had? The one thing after becoming a parent, my memory has just gone away. Like it's gone. It's gone.
It's amazing.
And
it's amazing how that works.
It is. It really is. So I cannot tell you what I accomplished last week, but I know I did something. So, then I have this notebook LM. Tell me what I did last week. What took most of my time up? Just things like that. But, record everything. Get the transcriptions. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's all out there. We just need to feed it, right?
Yeah.
How are you using technological efficiency in your ABM practices? We had a really great conversation on the last show about ABM and how it's, the differences between ABM and ABX. And I'm curious to get your take on how you can make it more effective.
Yeah. So all calls are recorded with PMM, who are the closest to the product. Tell me the pain points. Tell me, what should my ads be targeting? All of that information is in the company. I have it somewhere. And then like target account lists and lookalike account lists. I can ask, so here's to any sort of model, Claude or whatever, here are my target account lists. Am I missing anything? Who are the exact job titles that might need to, hear this message?
In using your tech brain for ABM, I would also like to get your perspective on how do you see ABM changing over the last 3 to 5 years, and where do you see it coming in the next, call it 18 to 24 months?
Yeah, I'd say it's become really hot because there's not as many investments being made. So marketing funds are getting slashed. So you really want to make sure you are using money towards the right ICP, is your target profile of people. Also tools. Tools have evolved quite a bit. Back when I was at Bitdefender, I don't know, I think 8 years ago now, we had something called Path Factory. It would flash up based on where somebody was coming from. It would flash up 5 different assets or however many assets you want. Here's a video you should watch. Here's a brief you should read. And that was very account based. Now there are tools that can help you make hundreds of landing pages with all a personalized message. And these tools combined with AI, can you imagine, if you feed it the pain points and you train them, every single account you're targeting can have its own page. You can tell them exactly how you can help and make their life easier and sell right then and there and have a conversion point. There's a really other cool tool that I'm using called Qualified, which I can see who's on the website on the account level. And sometimes I can even see it down to the individual level. But tools, there's so many tools. The only thing that's kind of a bummer is we're entering this cookieless world. Mm-hmm. So how do you track people in a cookieless world? Personally, I don't want to be tracked. But as a marketer, I'm like, I need to track. So that's kind of the next challenge to solve. Every year there's more hurdles, more obstacles. How are these solutions going to exist when you can no longer track, when everybody's anonymous?
Yeah, especially in global environments, right? I mean, data privacies are ever evolving, and you sneak over into the EMEA markets and there are over 20 different variations of GDPR compliance depending on what country you're actually working within. And I think to the point you made earlier, these tools are great and they're making us more efficient and they're allowing us to do more with less, but there are still gaps. There are still holes that we need to trust and rely on the experts to shore up. And then with the tools available, with the ability to personalize to that level, how important to you is sales and marketing alignment?
you need to be best friends. You need to be best friends with
Right.
SDRs, with the AEs, with leadership. I've always said that ABM is as much a marketing effort as it is sales. I'd even say, that an ABM manager sits right between the two and dotted lines to sales. But it's incredibly important. These people need to talk. They need to talk on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly. You have pod calls where you share cool analytics, juicy tidbits, things like that. But you are all a team working towards the same goal. Running ads is not ABM, but running ads, doing gifting, doing email, nurture, SDRs, reaching out on the phone. That's true ABM, and making sure you guys are really aligned. If you are not aligned, if you guys hate each other, ABM is not going to be successful, unfortunately.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, I think you're touching on a lot of the same ABM points that we had in our conversation last week with Scott. And I swear we're not sponsored by Path Factory, but both of you talked extensively about their viability in the space, even gifting. So I do think that's where we come from a personalization standpoint. But I guess how do you balance personalization and scale? Because both are needed in a
Yeah.
marketing go-to-market strategy, right?
Yeah. And that's where you utilize your SDRs, for example, but really making sure you're hitting the same or similar messaging. Also, when somebody, has been emailed, maybe they don't respond to email, but they go to Reddit. Great. You can find them on Reddit, or they're on LinkedIn, and then Google and every other news site or wherever they go to binge their daily things, you can find them there. But it's definitely a team effort. Um, and personalization is hard. So start small. Start with, you can't start with all Fortune 1000 companies. You need to narrow down the list, whether it's quarterly or monthly or yearly, but you need to make sure you can send that many emails with still a personal touch in
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. You started kind of toe tapping on search and relevance and how it
Mhm.
pertains to scalability. Aligned with the AI conversation that we're having, what is your view on how AI search is changing the way companies should think about or execute SEO?
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about what is happening with SEO and also what we call GEO, generative optimization. And honestly, personally, it's quite similar. It's still important to produce content. Actually, that's the most important thing is to produce content. So same. But with GEO, whenever you're using the LLMs, go into the research function and see what sources it's pulling in. So ask it a corporate type question, and you will see Reddit and PR. So that is where SEO is actually changing a little bit. Sorry, GEO is changing, but still similar. It is now the LLMs are now looking at external sources, and the more big names you have, credible sources, big news sites, the better. So PR is insanely important now. And
Mhm.
when on your own site, there's something called EEAT. That was a Google update that came out about a year ago, where it's how they rank content on your site. The more credible your content is, the better. So when you're producing content on your website, include names that are not associated with you. Use thought leadership. Also, have your leadership on other sources, PR or LinkedIn. LinkedIn leadership is super, super important now. But SEO is still a factor. Ultimately, it comes down to content. Wherever the content lives, syndication or external PR content is key.
Yeah, great advice. And you talk about PR at Verizon. We're focusing very heavily on that because we produce a lot of content. We house a lot of content, obviously, as what we do, but it is becoming more of a need. And I always liken it to PR has always had validity in the space, but it's always been too much. Too many articles, too long for people to actually read them. But given the AI tools that we have access to today, we don't need to read them all. It summarizes
Yep.
everything, and it to your point, it's pulling the information from those sources to
Yep.
to put together answers to our questions. So,
Yes. You have blog content. Before it
right,
was you structured it however you wanted. Make sure you have your H2s, H3s, and so forth. Now you need to make sure you're phrasing your H2s in a form of a question because people are using or searching in the form of questions. You also need schema markup. So that's the more technical side, making sure your website is properly coded to tell the LLMs, this is my answer and things like that. You're a robot's text file, but also a TLDR at the top of your content. So if you have really long form, 2,000 plus word blogs, for example, add a TLDR. That is what the LMs are scanning for to make sure you are relevant. And then FAQs at the bottom of your product pages, at the bottom of any blog, those will be the best performing ones because the LM doesn't have to make up an answer. It's right then, right there.
That's awesome. Good insights.
Yeah.
See, this is why I was so excited for today's conversation. I knew you'd bring it. So you mentioned Reddit specifically becoming more important. How should brands actually approach that? It's not something you can really leverage from a typical marketing channel, right?
Yeah, Reddit is hard. When you figure that one out, let me know.
We'll write a book.
You want people to talk about you, right? But you want people to talk about you organically. What I'm recommended we do as a company is we really need somebody that's involved in the community. Anytime something negative pops up on Reddit around your business, respond. And it's okay to respond as the company. Hey, this is Jane from Suki. I'm super sorry you had this horrible experience. I would love to help and fix it. You cannot pressure people to go on there and say, hey, write me a positive experience and review, because Redditors can see that 5 miles away and you will get downvoted and kicked off Reddit. So it's a tough one, but I think just making sure the community knows you're there and available and listening. But there is definitely a fine line of marketing on Reddit. Reddit doesn't want companies on there.
Right. No, they don't. But that's where all the content engagement is happening, right?
Yep.
So we've talked about Reddit, we've talked about PR, we've talked about SEO, GEO, we've talked about AI and ABM. I'm curious, in your experience, what are you seeing some teams do today that has already become obsolete?
Yeah, so a few things actually. Briefs. You can now easily create briefs based on meetings. So, have your meeting agenda, everything you need to cover about, let's say, a project or a campaign you want to launch. Verbally talk about it. Somebody's going to have to go back and create a brief. So take that meeting you just had where you talked about everything that belongs in a brief, get an agent that you've built and that you've trained to understand what are your needs as a team and marketers, and feed that meeting right into your agent and have it create a brief. I think it's a personal problem of mine. I'm like, oh my God, this brief is going to take me 45 minutes. I have to gather all my thoughts. No, all my thoughts are there. They've been expressed. Just have AI make it for you. It's so much easier, and ask it, what am I missing? What do I need to track down part of this campaign that I have not mentioned? And then just have this brief maker, but then just feed it all those points that, you come across over the next week. Also numbers, metrics. I have worked in the past with people that are not techie, that are more creative focused. Numbers, I want to do numbers with them. And it has become so much easier now to feed spreadsheets, raw data into these LLMs and have it organize it. That said, slop happens. And I see a lot of numbers coming out of thin air. So you still have to understand what you're building, what you're looking at, what data you're working with. But it's become so much quicker. I can, for example, export something from Google Analytics, GA4. Everyone hates it. It came out a couple of years ago. It's just such a pain to work with. Well, now I can feed it raw data and have, Claude build me reports. It makes things so much faster. So don't do these tasks that, they take a long time. They don't make you happy.
Don't waste cycles on the things that can be,
yes,
you could actually use the tools we're talking about for.
Totally, 100%. And if there's, if you have a need, ask AI, how can you help me with this? And some things you can't use AI for, and that's okay. But some things you can.
All right. My closing question is 2-part. One for you and then one for a hypothetical team. So I'm curious. I know personal growth is a massive, very important thing. What do you wish you knew? And I won't say how many years ago, but when you were a itty bitty wee kiddo coming into the marketing world, what do you wish you knew that you've learned? Maybe some hard knocks?
Yeah, honestly, I would say certifications, how important education is. I did not enjoy university. I was there just to kind of get it done. What I really enjoy is extended learning, learning things that I want to become good at. So what I wish I had done is invest a little more into these external certifications, find tools. When you don't have experience, you need to get that experience somewhere. Play with these tools. Get, all tools like SEMrush, for example, big SEO tool, has been around forever. Get their certification, and that's just something for you to talk about. For example, when you're interviewing, when you don't have all those years of experience.
Yeah. So the second part of the question is, so if you were advising a team starting today, and maybe they don't put such an emphasis on personal growth, but what would you advise them to stop immediately or start immediately or even double down on as they were building strategy, go to market strategy?
Figure out what you don't know or what you are not good at and become an expert in that. Do whatever it takes to learn, whether it's using AI, using research, taking a course, do it. And with AI, for example, I haven't coded. I'm not a coder. Last time I coded something was MySpace, and I was in middle school. But now, with AI, I can code things, and I can have it teach me and go through every step of the process. But understand, the skills you need on a daily or basis, and just go learn them. Like the world is your oyster.
Yeah, no, fantastic advice from the mind of Karina. I knew this was going to be an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for your time, sharing your insights. I really appreciate them. I hope everybody listening also found value in them as well. To everyone listening, if you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to give us a follow, hit the like button, maybe even share with some of your colleagues. We'll have some upcoming episodes continuing to have more conversations from the marketers themselves and how they see technologists shaping the future of B2B growth. So, Karina, thank you again so much for your time. And everyone, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. Take care.